Hello and welcome to End of Life University. This is your host, Dr. Karen Wyatt, and I'm so glad that you've decided to join us today for this conversation. And I'm very excited because today is one of the rare days when we're able to have live call-ins for questions and comments from the audience. So I want to just warn you about that in advance. We'll be taking your calls and questions later on, about halfway through the interview. And all of you are on mute right now, but if you have a question, when the time comes up, if you're calling in on the phone, you'll press *2 on your keypad in order to let me know that you have a question. And if you're listening on the webcast, you can type your question in on the little box on the lower left corner. There's a little box that says submit your question here. You type the question in and press submit, and then I will be able to read that question out loud. I'll remind you of these instructions later on, but I just wanted you to be aware that we're able to take live questions today, so keep that in mind as you're listening, and we'd love to hear from you. So today, my guest, I'm very excited about this call. My guest is EOLUSuarez. Giselle is a Cuban-born American by birth who was led to the Netherlands in 1995, where she pursued her lifelong dream of acting and performing. She graduated from the Royal Theatre Arts Academy in Utrecht, Netherlands, and spent over a decade playing, directing, and teaching in the European professional theater circuit. Giselle returned to the United States in 2009 to be with her mother, who had been diagnosed with a brain tumor. She spent 9 months assisting her mom on her death journey. This experience changed her life drastically, and she became fascinated by the miracle of death. After the death of her mother, Betty, she became very involved with death, working with and assisting others in many different ways, such as hospice work, end-of-life and grief counseling, ceremony, and, of course, the creation of the Death Monologues, a life's work. It has become one of her passions to help shift the consciousness of death in our culture, and this is what inspired the creation of the Death Monologues, which unites her two arbitrary passions, death and theater. Giselle, thank you so much for joining us today and talking with us about the Death Monologues.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I've been excited about this because I love the fact that death and dying and end-of-life issues are being presented throughout our society in many different ways, and you're one of the few people I'm aware of who's presenting death on stage. And I was hoping you'd talk with us a little bit more about your own journey and really how you came to write the Death Monologues, what inspired you.
Sure. First, I want to say that the death of my mother really did open up something that turned out to be a gift that revealed the miracle of death and what it can be. But it wasn't like, oh, yay, my mother's dying, this is a great gift. I mean, it was also the most challenging time of my life. And it was in the resisting and in the fighting of it and in the denial of it that there was so much pain and so much suffering. And through witnessing this journey of my mother's death, towards the end, death, I feel it was really like this character that was showing me something that was absolutely essential here about life and death. And so by starting to surrender and listen instead of resisting and following instead of trying to lead, I did receive this huge gift. Now, it was a huge cost, of course, but there were so many magical moments and gifts that it's actually the final monologue in the show is my mother's death story. And I tell, about these gifts and what happened in that part. But it was so profound and so freeing, I guess is the word. It literally freed me from this sort of fear and suffering that is connected to death in our own personal lives, but also as a culture in general. So I was just guided to do this, to write something. Like my mom, every time I had an experience that was, profound or, adventurous. My mom would say, you have to write a theater piece about this. You have to write a theater piece about this. So I could almost hear her telling me this as I was going through, the aftermath of losing my mother, which changed my life in many ways. For one thing, it brought me to live back in the United States. I was living with my husband and our son in the Netherlands. So I came back to the U.S. and we made our home in Arizona, and something was happening. Like everything that death shares in this theater piece, that the monologues that present different perspectives. Maybe I should clarify that the Death Monologues is a one-woman show, and I play all the roles. And there's 5 unique monologues that give different perspectives and different experiences that have to do with death and dying. And then Death is our master of ceremonies who takes us on this journey, weaving us in and out of these 5 monologues. And each time Death comes on stage, I don't know. It's played by me, but it's sort of, not a sex. So anyway, it says something very, very significant and sometimes hard to buy kind of thing about what death is. And I'd be happy to share some of those moments later. But I did not feel this way about death. Even after my mother died, even after I came to this peaceful understanding about what death is, I still had, what was interesting is being set free by my mother's death and understanding what that was paralleled by this overwhelming, suffocating fear of my own son dying. Ironically, my mother died on the day that my son was born, because he was born in Holland, so the time difference made it that her death day was his birthday. So I went from sitting with her body for 6 hours after she died to decorating her home, because that's where we were staying in California, for my son's first birthday, which was her only grandchild. So, yeah, something really overcame me, and I just was debilitated by this fear of something happening to my son. So at some point, it's almost like I raised my hands to the sky and I said, tell me something, show me what this is, because I can't, it was so, every moment of joy was tainted by this overwhelming fear, like, it could end any moment, It's sometimes totally illogical fears, like he's got a fever. Kids get fevers. Every time he got a fever, he's going to die. And it was really like an overwhelming, paralyzing fear. So I really felt that death, and I call it death, whatever, was listening, and it said, okay, I'm going to take you deeper down this rabbit hole, and I'm going to show you what this is. And I came out of that rabbit hole. I didn't know that I would come out, but I did, and I had a whole different awareness and experience of what death is. And that's what really, then there was no way I could not write this piece. Because it's like, this cannot stay in me. This cannot just be my own experience. And whether it helps other people or not, it's great if it does. But just the fact that this was in me was too much, even if I just had to get it out. So I would go to the cemetery here in the small town where I live in Cottonwood, and I would sit next to all the graves in the peaceful sunlight, and I would write the death monologues. That's where they were sort of birthed. And in the end, I had no idea if it would ever happen, because it took a while to find a director or to find the right timing and the right situation for it to be made. But I'm like, maybe this is it. Maybe it just is meant to just be scribbled in pen in this notebook that I have, and that's it, But like I said, it had its sort of life of its own. Death had a life of its own, and things started to happen in a timing that I had no control of. Sometimes I was going crazy because of how long it was taking. Sometimes I was like, maybe it's not going to happen. I have to just surrender and let it go. And then we had a theater that we had, worked with, and it kept getting postponed because of double bookings and all this crazy stuff. And I'm like, you know what? I don't understand. And again, I heard death whispering like it did when it gave me this profound message. It's like, just surrender. You're not in charge here. It'll happen when it happens and how it happens. I had to give up worrying about money, where the money's going to come from for this. I had to all this stuff, and sure enough, it happened, and it's still happening. So I'm eternally grateful. I was scared to heck about it. The first opening night, standing on that stage by myself in front of a full house, I almost passed out before I stepped on that stage. I think if I had taken a second longer before that drum roll kicked in, I probably would have. But once I was on that stage, it was just happening. It was happening through me. I was not really in charge of it. And the reactions and the response were just like another proof and validation that this is really something, and it's beyond my own personal, glory of it, although I do enjoy that as well. It's just doing what it's doing, and I had no idea of the possibilities for this. So I'm very, very just impressed and excited.
Well, as I listen to your story, it's fascinating to me, first of all, that you were kind of called and led to go to the Netherlands at a younger age, where you started this acting career, and it sounds like you had a very successful, productive career in acting, and then got a completely different call to come back to the U.S. and take care of your mother as she was dying. And you also answered that call by changing your life totally and coming all the way back to be with your mom. And each step along the way, and then answering the call to write the play, and now to actually produce it and present it and take it on the road to share with other people. It seems to me you've taken lots of risks, and you've been willing to step up at each time you've been asked to do something.
Yeah, it definitely, and at some point it sounds very courageous when I hear you talking about it. I was so brave to do that and follow the dream and all that, and that's definitely part of it. But the bigger part, how I experience it, is that I really had no choice. It was almost like I don't know, I was made for this. You're the one who's gonna be the vessel for this, and it's because of that I feel that so strongly, that I can take these risks, that I can dare to stand on that stage and see the things that I'm saying. And, some of the things that death says they can be hard to swallow. And I've actually thought about this in my own personal journey. If my own, let's just go really extreme, okay? If my own beautiful son, who's 5 years old, if something horrible happened to him, where he was brutally murdered or whatever, that happens in the world, could I still stand on that stage and say what I'm saying? And it's easy when you have, and it's not easy, I shouldn't say that, but when your experience of death has been one that is gentle and heart-opening, and, like what I experienced with my mother's death, even though that there was a lot of tough things in that. But how about if something like this? And I was praying to death, so to speak, that I don't have to go through that to have to present this or create this. But I knew that if it was going to happen, if that was an option, or if that's how it came, that I could still stand on that stage and say those words and deliver that message and play that role. I was working in a metaphysical store in Sedona, and there was a phase when I was writing the death monologues where people were coming to me with crazy experiences of loved ones dying, being murdered. I started getting what was called, what you call medium experiences. But I realized, and that's all kind of changed now, but I realized that was happening because I was, again, being led deeper down the rabbit hole by death to be shown more and more and more about this through other people's stories and experiences, where I was just a facilitator for